I had diligently saved $500,000. One day I witnessed my sister-in-law Grace's suspicious behavior, and later discovered that my bank book had been stolen. When I confronted my sister-in-law, she brazenly said something like this: "I'll use it in your place."
I couldn't help but be astonished by her audacity.
However, Grace, with a skip in her step, headed to the bank, only to be shocked by the actions taken by the bank staff. My name is Noelle, 35 years old. I work as a nurse. My husband Greg is an office worker. We have been married for 7 years now, and have been blessed with a child. We currently live with our 5-year-old son, Evan. Greg and I met through a mutual friend, and from the moment we first met, it felt like we were old friends. Thanks to that, our married life had smoothly entered its 7th year. After graduating from nursing school, I continued to work as a nurse with Greg's understanding. I took a break from work to focus on childcare after giving birth, but once Evan grew older, I returned to work and resumed my nursing career. Although my job can be inflexible at times, my in-laws, who live within walking distance, always dote on me. We often visit their home, fostering strong connections with Greg and Evan. With these circumstances, I thought I was fortunate to have such a supportive environment. To uphold their trust and expectations, I persevered each day with a positive mindset, working hard. My hobby is saving money. It's not because I'm stingy, but rather because I started saving with the future and my family in mind, and it has become a full-fledged hobby. It has been 15 years since I started working, and the amount I have diligently saved has now reached $500,000. I divided it into multiple bank books. I always set goals such as going on a leisurely overseas trip with my family, or being able to provide for Evan's needs immediately. Saving and being frugal while considering the future is not a burden for me. In fact, I find satisfaction in seeing the money accumulate and being able to quickly fulfill small requests from Greg and Evan. I even find joy in these things. Of course, I continue to save money so that I can promptly handle any unexpected situations that may arise with my in-laws. However, I haven't told Greg or my in-laws about this. I don't think there's a need to specifically mention it. Saving money is my personal hobby, and involving others feels somewhat different. Besides, I'd rather avoid imposing a burden on Greg unless he shares the same hobby of saving money. Also, since I'm saving money on my own, I can use it whenever I feel like it, even treating myself to a luxurious lunch. Although I've only done it once since giving birth. However, if there's another significant event and I feel that I've worked hard, I'm prepared to use the money without hesitation. Anyway, even as an adult, I was able to have a hobby and further enjoy a sense of fulfillment in my life. However, there's something that has been bothering me lately. It's about Greg's sister, Grace. Grace is my sister-in-law. She is still single and lives with her parents. It seems she works as a temp, but she never stays in a job for long. Despite that, she always wears designer brands and constantly indulges in spending on her days off. It seems she doesn't contribute any money to her parents' household either. Even my saint-like in-laws have grown frustrated with her inability to become independent. Grace is not a bad person, but sometimes I feel like she belittles me. Most of the time she just mocks me for not paying much attention to my appearance. But for that, I feel uncomfortable around her. I may not be as knowledgeable about fashion as Grace, and I don't go to spas or nail salons. However, I do make an effort to buy new clothes and use skincare and makeup products that suit me. But Grace dismisses my efforts as trivial and insists that as a woman I should strive to stay youthful, because being young-looking brings more benefits. Moreover, she suggests that as someone younger than Grace, I should make even more effort. Whenever such discussions arise, Grace always adds anecdotes about how things were when she was young, which can be quite tiresome to listen to. Because of these things, I didn't want to have much to do with Grace. However, our house is within walking distance of my in-laws' house, so Grace occasionally comes to our place to relax. She shows up unexpectedly, which surprises me, but she claims that as a sister-in-law, she's like family and makes herself at home. She helps herself to the snacks we have stocked up, drinks up all the juice meant for Evan, and behaves selfishly. It's true that when she comes while I'm doing household chores, it can make me feel a bit complicated, especially when I'm busy. Grace just shows up out of the blue, relaxes for a while, and then leaves. The timing of her departure is sporadic, and on days when Grace has no plans, she can stay until evening. As a result, countless precious days off have been ruined. I've wondered if it's worth discussing with Greg or giving her a gentle warning, but I haven't been able to bring myself to do so, which only intensifies my feelings of frustration. One day, due to an influenza outbreak, Evan's nursery announced temporary closure. However, my workplace is short-staffed, and I couldn't take time off immediately. When I called Greg, he said he couldn't suddenly leave work. My mother-in-law, Jessie's health wasn't good either, and we couldn't burden my father-in-law, Barry, so we couldn't leave Evan at their place. I was at a loss for what to do when my in-laws suggested that Grace, who happened to have the day off, could take care of Evan. I had never seen her play with Evan before, and I felt a bit awkward about owing a favor to Grace, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I reluctantly decided to entrust Evan to Grace. She kindly agreed and came to our house in the morning. I managed to negotiate an early release from work and hurried home. Luckily, there were no emergencies today, so I was able to leave early. When I rushed home, I found Evan sleeping in the living room. I covered him with a blanket and looked around for Grace. Despite calling out loudly, there was no response from her. I wondered if she was in the bathroom, so I knocked on the door, but it was unlocked and empty. Feeling something was off, I searched the second floor, and the bedroom door made a creaking sound as it opened. Grace peeked her head out and gasped when she saw me walking down the hallway.
Oh, you're back.
Her behavior was clearly suspicious and panicked, which made me question what she had been up to. When I asked her what she was doing, Grace's eyes darted left and right, and then she came up with an excuse.
I got the room wrong. Sorry about that.
Watching her say that with a smile, I felt even more suspicious. For now, I expressed my gratitude for looking after Evan and invited her to have lunch that I had bought since Evan was sleeping. However, Grace unusually started to hesitate. At that moment, she was hiding something behind her back, so when I tried to peek, she purposely raised her voice.
I got tired dealing with the kid. I feel like having something to eat after all. Could you make me some coffee?
Upon hearing those words, I immediately said I would prepare it and led her back to the living room. Once in the living room, Grace quickly approached her bag and made an excuse that her phone was ringing, fiddling with her bag for a while. I glanced at her sideways while brewing the coffee and laid out the 2 sandwiches I had bought for lunch on the table. Grace ate them for a while and then started reporting on how Evan was doing in the morning. Suddenly, she clapped her hands as if remembering something important and hastily left. I thought her behavior was strange, but I convinced myself that I was just tired and overthinking things, so I tried not to pay too much attention to her attitude. A few days later, I received a surprising call from a friend who worked at a bank.
That person came.
After hearing the details over the phone, I was taken aback. I informed Greg about it and decided to go to my parents' house with Evan. When we arrived at my parents' house, my in-laws were surprised by our sudden visit. Amidst all that, when Grace saw me, she turned pale while everyone else seemed unaffected. I ignored her and told Evan to play in another room, then began discussing the matter with my in-laws.
Yesterday I received a call from a friend who works at a bank. They said someone withdrew money without my consent from my savings account.
My in-laws widened their eyes at my words and Grace's face turned ashen. I added that my friend wanted to confirm with me before contacting the police, so they took the trouble to reach out to me. I relayed all the information my friend had given me, subtly mentioning the reason for having savings and expressing my shock at the situation. My in-laws were both astonished and outraged by what I had told them and raged at the person who attempted to steal from me.
It's a crime. Report it to the police.
That's right. To try and steal someone's precious savings is despicable.
My in-laws were adamant about it. However, Grace, with a pale face and trembling, interjected with the following statement.
Wait a minute. Isn't involving the police a bit too much?
My in-laws scolded her, wondering what she was saying. They firmly believed that this incident was a clear-cut crime and that the perpetrator should be punished by law to prevent potential future victims. I calmly supplemented my in-laws' statements, explaining that I kept the passbook at home and hadn't taken it outside, so there was a possibility that it had been stolen from our house. I also mentioned that since it could be a case of burglary, I intended to have the police investigate it.
Her face grew even paler and she bowed her head. Unaware of her condition, my in-laws became even more heated, emphasizing that having a burglar in the house was too dangerous, demanding that we call the police immediately and have them collect fingerprints from the room to find the culprit.
Upon hearing those words, Grace stood up abruptly.
Wait, so in the end the money wasn't stolen, right? Then it's fine, isn't it?
Even with Grace's words, my in-laws didn't waver in their stance that it would be better to make things clear. Grace grew more anxious and raised her voice, claiming that collecting fingerprints was too excessive. Perhaps my in-laws found Grace's attitude suspicious as they asked her why she was so opposed to it. In a desperate expression, Grace confessed that on the day she was left alone with Evan, she accidentally entered the bedroom, fearing that strange suspicions might arise.
That's why. If the money wasn't stolen, maybe it's fine.
In response to her statement, my in-laws wore bitter expressions. In the midst of it all, I looked directly at Grace.
How do you know that the money wasn't stolen?
But
As soon as she heard those words, Grace's face clearly indicated that she had been caught. She began to make excuses, claiming she hadn't disclosed anything about the whereabouts of the money and had only explained that someone had tried to withdraw money from the savings account. I questioned why she knew that it hadn't been stolen. Grace hesitated for a moment, then dropped her gaze, looking embarrassed. My in-laws stared intently at her face, causing her to quickly turn pale. Grace accidentally gave herself away, causing her parents to lean toward her and ask if she knows anything. Confronted by their relentless questioning, Grace initially denied knowing anything, but faced with my in-laws' fierce expressions, she began to change her tune.
I was just thinking of borrowing it. I didn't intend to steal it or anything.
Grace's attempt to play innocent only fueled my frustration. I sighed in exasperation at Grace's actions, trying to calm my frustration in a composed voice.
Did you really think about borrowing $500,000?
My in-laws were shocked by the enormous sum of money. Immediately, they looked at Grace and leaned forward, asking if she had stolen it. Cornered, Grace finally revealed her true colors.
You don't need that much money, you're so uncool.
Those words left me, Greg, and even my inquisitive in-laws speechless. It was hard to believe that she would steal for such a trivial reason. I asked her to explain in more detail why she wanted to steal, and Grace began to speak excitedly.
According to Grace, using money for anything other than herself was meaningless. Furthermore, she found the idea of saving money even more inconceivable. If I had such a large sum of money hidden away, she said I should use it to change my uncool self even just a little bit.
Not only was this infuriating, but it was also incomprehensible. Yet, Grace proudly looked at me as if she were right.
She went on to say that if it wasn't being used, it would be unnecessary to keep it, and someone else should use it instead.
Seeing Grace unapologetic, I wasn't just angry, but genuinely dumbfounded.
Uncool, you say?
Unconsciously, I responded with a cold tone and an expression, surprising myself.
Yes, the money would be happier being used by someone as beautiful as me, instead of someone like you.
This statement left even Greg dumbfounded, and my in-laws began to tremble with anger. I glanced at them sideways and took a short sigh to maintain my composure.
But you couldn't do it, could you?
As I said that, Grace exaggeratedly nodded and insulted my friend, calling her useless and exaggerated woman who called security guards. Facing Grace, I calmly conveyed my message.
Just to be safe, I changed the seal for the bank book.
Grace reacted with a twitch upon hearing those words and glared at me. She began to question why I suddenly changed it, so I told her that I had been suspicious of her from the beginning. When I noticed that the bank book was missing, I immediately went to change the seal on the first morning of the next day.
I also informed my friend who worked at the bank in case Grace showed up with the bank book.
I asked my friend to let me know if that happened. As expected, Grace appeared in the afternoon. When she came to the bank, she brought several bank books, a seal, and my stolen insurance card, which she had somehow taken. She posed as me and claimed she wanted to withdraw money from the savings account. However, my friend, who knew the situation beforehand, refused to process the withdrawal.
When asked for the reason, my friend mentioned that the seal on the application was different, and Grace made a fuss claiming it couldn't be true.
She was so enraged that when a security guard approached, sensing danger, she quickly turned pale, then hurriedly left, saying she would come back later. Upon hearing that story, Grace's face turned pale, and she exclaimed that I was the worst. "Was it your doing that I couldn't withdraw the money?" I nodded silently in response, and told her that I had deduced it from her behavior on the day she cared for Evan.
Then Grace accused me of being a fraud. I've been humiliated. Pay me compensation.
Hearing such an unexpected claim, I immediately considered turning her over to the police. However, before I could take action, furious Barry punched Grace in the face. It was the first time I witnessed someone flying away from a blow, and I was shocked, covering my mouth with both hands in disbelief. Greg had a similar reaction, and even Grace, the one who had been struck, was dumbfounded.
Cut it out with your nonsense.
Barry's shouting echoed through the room. We watched in suspense as he and Grace exchanged glances.
Someone like you is no longer our family. Get out.
Barry's face turned bright red with anger as he declared the severance of ties with Grace. For a moment, Grace didn't understand what had just happened and was flustered, but she quickly regained her composure and shouted back, asking why she was being blamed.
It's because of you that Dad got mad at me. I'm the victim here.
Grace blamed me while claiming to be the victim, but she was the one who had committed something close to a crime, and I was the one who almost became the victim. I should have reported her to the police, but since Barry was angry on my behalf, I said that I would let this incident go if Grace left my in-laws' house. Regarding this, Grace continued to insist that she was the real victim, but I looked at her with cold eyes.
Be grateful that I'm not turning you into the police.
Upon hearing those words, Grace gasped for breath. Perhaps realizing that she couldn't escape from her actions, she began to cry out like a child. Leaving her in the care of my in-laws, Greg and I took Evan, who had been playing in another room, and left my in-laws' house. Afterward, Grace was indeed kicked out of her parents' house. When we asked my in-laws for the details, they lectured her, telling her that stealing money is wrong and that everyone has their own way of using money. However, Grace insisted that she had done nothing wrong. Furthermore, she even threatened to sue me for embarrassing her. My in-laws were at a loss for words. They felt that they might have spoiled her, leading to this situation. So they made the decision to kick Grace out of the house and let her live on her own to foster independence. Apparently, Grace resisted when they tried to evict her. It seems that she had accumulated debt through credit card cash advances and claimed that she wouldn't be able to survive if she was kicked out of the house. She cried out, asking what would happen if her lovely daughter ended up drowning in debt and losing her beauty. She clung to her parents, but they firmly told her that it's none of their business. In the end, they managed to forcefully evict her. After being kicked out of my in-laws' house, Grace even showed up at our home unannounced. However, we ignored her completely, following my in-laws' instructions. As a result, Grace lost her temper, and it seems that someone in the neighborhood reported a suspicious person due to her causing such a scene. The police arrived and took Grace into custody. Later, we received a call from the police, and when we explained the situation, they chuckled. Since then, we don't know what happened to her. What happened to her? That's because in order to avoid Grace's intrusion, we took my in-laws' suggestion and moved along with the whole family to a new place. I am currently living with my in-laws. Evan seems delighted to be living with his grandparents. We had to use our savings for the moving expenses and the new home, so our savings have decreased a bit. However, from now on, both my in-laws and Greg will contribute to saving money together. And with everyone, including my in-laws, we are all working hard every day with the goal of going on a luxurious trip together.